Welcome to Not in a Huff with Jackson Huff, where we interview newsmakers, storytellers, and all-around interesting people. Sit back, relax, unless you're driving, and enjoy the show. Here's Jackson.
Hello. I am Jackson Huff. This is Not in a Huff. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. Another great week, another great guest. I have on Stephanie Bingham. Now, Stephanie, definitely a different type of podcast than we've done before. Stephanie, she is a paranormal historian, and she also sees paranormal spirits. Now, I'll tell you, just like any conversation that I have that some people may agree with and some people don't, my goal in this is to talk to interesting people, have an interesting conversation. Always keep an open mind. I certainly always keep an open mind in the interview. Whether I agree with what they're saying, with any guest or not. My goal is just to let them tell their story. An absolutely entertaining story, if nothing else. I think that there's some real semblance of truth to it. I think there has to be in order for her to be as passionate as she is. But please do listen and keep an open mind. That's all I can ask. I hope that you listen and you think, wow, this is quite the story. I hope you're entertained and if paranormal is something that you believe, I definitely think Stephanie is a great person to hear from. Now, with that said, of course, those who really, really, really hate paranormal and, spirits and things like that, I would maybe caution you not to listen to this one. There's so many people out there who really like the paranormal and like scary movies and like spirits and ghosts and watching, the Ghost Hunter TV shows and all that kind of stuff that, I couldn't pass up bringing on Stephanie because she's just great, between her immense knowledge about paranormal, all things paranormal and spirits and all that kind of stuff, between her consulting on, TV shows, history shows and paranormal shows. It was just a great conversation. We talked a lot about some of her experiences in paranormal, and that's where, it could potentially get scary for some people. We do talk about some lighthearted moments in things that she's seen, but also some scary moments. So please, I guess, do take caution there. We also talk about whether, all these scary movies and ghost adventures and ghost hunter shows that we see, whether they're even real or whether they're kind of, fake for ratings. I think you'll be really interested to hear what she has to say about that. I learned a lot. I think it was a great conversation. I think you'll like it too. So enough of the rambling on here. Here is my interview with Stephanie Bingham. I am here today with Stephanie Bingham. Stephanie, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining me. So if you would, obviously kind of the overarching thing is that you are a historian and kind of dabble in the paranormal. But other than that, tell us a little about yourself and your background before we kind of dive in.
So my name is Stephanie. I was born and raised in Western Kentucky. I grew up here. I went away to college, first at Eastern Kentucky University, then at Kent State University. I actually got my undergraduate degrees in history and anthropology and my master's degree in history. In undergrad, I studied specifically New Orleans voodoo at the turn of the century, and in grad school, I studied the spiritualist movement. So in a nutshell, I sort of academically studied early American ghost hunting. And then I sort of have this weird side hobby where I found out very early on in my life that I saw things that other people don't see, specifically ghosts. And I took me down a weird path, I suppose you could say.
Yeah, I would assume that it would. So how did that come about? How did you learn that you were first seeing, things that others weren't seeing? Where did you, I guess, see something you thought everyone else saw, or did you know that it was a little bit strange from the beginning?
So at the beginning, I had no idea, at all. The first one that I know I saw, I was about a year and a half old. There had been a relative in the family who had died. And I think I was aware that somebody had died, but I didn't really know what that meant. So I remember this man coming through the window, and he would sit and talk to me at night. And that's what it was. He come in through the window and he talked to me. And when you're that little, you don't really logic out why that should not happen. So I told my mom about it, and she sort of patted me on my head and said, okay, and just sent me on about my business. And then it kept happening over and over again until finally, because I was giving messages, things that he was saying for me to tell people. And eventually she pulled out a group family photo and was like, is the person you're seeing in this picture? And I picked out a gentleman who I'd never met before, but that was the man. And it was the relative who had recently died. So my parents knew very early on. They chose specifically not to tell me what was happening. So I did not personally realize that I was seeing things that other people didn't until very late elementary school. I was very slow on the uptake there.
Yeah. So I guess what, I in the intro, I kind of wasn't exactly sure what to call you. So what do you call yourself with that? I don't know and I don't really know the difference between, I don't know, mediums, clairvoyants, ghost hunters. I don't really know. So what all is
Absolutely. So a medium, by a very technical, very old historic definition, is a person, generally a woman, who allows their body to become a medium for a spirit to use. Sometimes that's in the form of like a walk-in possession where something else literally takes over their body and either speaks through them, or sometimes will do writing, like automatic writing for them. You also have psychics. Psychics aren't necessarily the same thing as medium. They oftentimes share some overlap there, but they're not the same altogether. A psychic can see, can sense, a clairvoyant, a clairaudient, people that hear things, people that know things, so clairsentient. They are psychics. They can perceive things around them that aren't quite the way everybody else perceives them. Whereas a ghost hunter is going to be someone who goes out in the field and actively searches for ghosts. Then you have paranormal investigators, which will oftentimes say, we're not ghost hunters. We are investigating the paranormal phenomena here. We're not trying to catch a ghost. So there's lots of weird little variations in terminology there. But for myself, I generally call myself quirky or weird, or a paranormal historian. It's kind of what it comes down to.
Well, paranormal historians, what we'll go with then. So you did an awesome job kind of explaining that and breaking it down. So if you would, let's break down one more. What's
Okay.
what maybe is the difference, or is it interchangeable to say spirit and ghost?
So a spirit and a ghost, those are very personal definitions for people. Historically, you see spirit generally used with things that aren't necessarily human. Fairies, demons, jinn, things like that will oftentimes be called spirits, whereas a ghost is generally something that was at one time alive and in a people suit, if you will. You also find like spirits of animals, things like that. But in today's day and age, I've seen that sort of melded and mixed in a bunch of different ways. So people use it interchangeably, some people don't.
Yeah, yeah. So you mentioned that you saw your first ghost or spirit. I believe it would be a ghost based on the definition that you just
It
said.
would. Yes.
Um, when you were young, and then you kind of learned as you went exactly what it was. So I guess where has that taken you in the years since? I assume that you're a few years past elementary school.
Just a couple years past elementary school at this point. So basically, once I figured out what was happening, it took me some time to sort of come to grips with what it was and sort of how odd it was. I'm from Kentucky. It's a very biblically based area. It's very strong Christian roots everywhere. I remember in school people telling me that I'd sold my soul to the devil. I mean, that was common. Kids are cruel. But one of the things that I wanted to do for myself was to give myself context. I wanted to prove to myself that I was not the first person to have experienced this, that there was a long tradition of people who had experienced before me, and that they were able to deal with it and actually make it functional in their lives. And that is actually why I studied what I did in college. I wanted to find groups where people had experiences like mine, and they had used them and learned about them and given themselves the okay really to experience what they're naturally experiencing. So that is why I took the career choice that I did in that. And from that, I've been able to work in museums, and I currently actually work as a historian for a distillery. So that's fun.
Yeah, I'd say so. So I guess, when a lot of people that don't know too much about this hear about, ghosts and spirits and things, I think they naturally, maybe they're a little interested, but it's also a little bit scary.
Yeah,
So, I do want to ask you about, scary encounters. I know that's something that we want to talk about. But before that, those who maybe are a little uneasy, I think I know the answer to this, but I mean, are all spirits and ghosts, they're not all necessarily bad, correct?
absolutely not. No. The grand majority of specifically ghosts, human spirits, are exceedingly kind. They're exceedingly sweet. Most of the time, when a human spirit is here, it is for either the reason that they loved the house, the location, the object, whatever it is they're coming back to see, or they are coming back to see their people, their family. So a lot of people will have paranormal experiences around the time that a child is born, things like that. And they're not quite sure why, but 9 times out of 10, that experience they're having is based on a relative who has passed, who's come back to see the grandchild or the great grandchild that had just been born. So most ghosts, 9 times out of 10, they're good people. They were good people, they still are. With that being said, you always have that one person who's a jerk in life is still going to be a jerk in death. So
So what do you define as a paranormal experience? You've used that a few times. Is that necessarily just seeing a ghost, or is there a lot more to it than just that?
there's absolutely a lot more to it. So it can be seeing a ghost. It can be feelings of being watched, oftentimes is reported, smelling a perfume or a cologne or like smoke that you associate with someone. It can be objects moving. It can be hearing someone call your name or a tapping or things like that. It can even be a dream sometimes. Ghosts will actually deliver messages, dead loved ones specifically, in dreams to someone who is alive. That I would consider a paranormal experience. But to me, it is anything outside that normal experience that can be explained by something that has happened from the other side, if you will. Pennies from heaven are a great explanation of that as well. Finding pennies, for whatever reason, very easy for spirits to manipulate. And they'll leave them in weird places, like in between the sheets on a made bed or in your bathtub, places that you're sure to see them, but places you're sure you did not leave them. It's oftentimes a message from a spirit that they are with you. Just little things like that.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, we talked about 9 out of 10 of these experiences are normally positive ones, but
Mhm.
there's that 10% that isn't. So do tell us a little bit about some of those more scary experiences you've had.
So if you take ghosts and you say 10% of ghosts are bad, if you look at the entire realm of things that aren't in bodies, if you will, and things that might not have been human, it's where you get into the really weird stuff. And if you want to say that 10% of human ghosts are not necessarily the nicest, probably 5% of the inhuman ones are really what you don't want to meet. And for some reason or the other, I have had more than my fair share of encounters with things that aren't quite people. And the first one that really sort of resonated with me actually happened when I was an undergrad. Now, this happened at our dorm, oldest dorm on campus, and they called it a suitcase campus. Everyone left on the weekends. Nobody stayed on campus. You're basically alone in a giant building built in the early 1800s. So, it's got a nice creepy atmosphere to it. When you add to that my roommate at the time was also a psychic, she also saw dead people, it made for a really, really weird and sort of supercharged time. But her mother had actually gone on a mission trip, and she had ministered to a group that did not want to be ministered to, and then had accepted a gift from them. So she brought the gift. It was a string of beads, a string of wooden beads on a cloth string. And she brought them back with her to her house. And as soon as they got to her house, she started having odd things happen there. Hearing giggling, hearing little feet running, and just sort of feeling super creeped out. So she told her daughter. So that was my roommate. And being the good daughter that she was, she brought the beads to our campus. And my roommate decided she didn't need to tell me about this, and she actually stuck the beads for safekeeping under my bed without telling me. So at that point, I started having friends, 2 or 3 or 4 of them come up to me, and they wanted to tell me about a weird dream they'd had about this cute little girl, and they were either laying in bed or in a bathtub, and this little girl was standing at the foot of it, smiling at them, and they were terrified. The first time I heard this, I was like, this isn't what I deal with, so I'm sorry you had a bad dream. And the second and third time, I pretty much knew something was up, but I didn't know what it was. So I was back at the dorm, and it was a Saturday morning, and because I have a great social life, I was doing laundry. So the laundry in our building is actually down in the basement, and it was a flight and a half of stairs without a landing in between them. So it was a very long staircase. Now I was walking down into the basement with my laundry basket, and I closed the door behind me, and the energy of the place changed. If anybody's ever felt like when all the hair stands up on your arms or your neck, it's that feeling. The room almost became electric. I knew I wasn't alone. And I had just a split second to sort of register that before I felt little hands on the back of my legs. And it pushed me forward, and I rolled down about a third of the way of the stairs, dropped the basket. I grabbed the banister because I didn't want to die. And I sort of caught myself there and, did the mental check of, am I all still in one piece? And I was, and I turned and I looked back up to the top of the stairs, and I saw what has to be one of the cutest children I've ever seen in my life. She was adorable, little dark hair, dark eyes, a cute little short sleeve rose colored nightgown on, just adorable little child, probably 7, 8, that sort of age range, adorable. And she's smiling at me. And when I looked at her smile, I realized why my friends that had been having this dream were terrified. Her teeth weren't human. They were pointed like a shark's teeth. And she was just sitting there smiling at me. She was so excited about what she'd just done. And in that moment, I had just that register of sort of what I'm seeing, but not really understanding what I'm seeing. And that sort of fight or flight reflex caught in. And that is when I learned that my fight or flight reflex is broken, because I decided in that moment without thinking that the best plan of action for me was to run back up the stairs, and I was going to grab her. I have no idea what I was going to do when I caught her, but I was going to catch her. So I run back up the stairs. Luckily for me, by the time I get there, she has just poofed and is gone. And about that time, my brain caught up with me and was like, what are you doing? And then I ran sort of in a panic back to my room. And I told my roommate what had just happened. And she's like, oh, I brought these beads back from my mom, told me the whole story. And so then we had to get rid of them. So that spirit in particular was essentially a protector spirit of the group that her mother had been ministering to. She was malicious towards me and towards my friend and my friend's family, but she was not malevolent. She was not evil. She was doing her job. Her job was to protect her people and their beliefs. And that's exactly what she was doing. So we had to take the object that she was attached to, essentially the string of beads, and we actually took them and threw them into the Kentucky River. So essentially, she would have no energy there to take, because in general, when a spirit manifests, it needs human energy. So excitement, happiness, fear, things like that from a person in order to gain the energy it needs to manifest itself. So by putting her in water where she cannot affect people, that will eventually weaken and she can go back to where she came from. So it got rid of the ghost on our end, and eventually we'll send her back to where she came from, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's terrifying, and I don't really, I don't know exactly how you would have ran towards the problem, but hey.
I'm apparently out of my mind. Like when I realized I had ran up those stairs, I kicked myself. I still kick myself to this day. I don't know what I was thinking, but
Yeah. Well, you live to tell the tale, so I guess that's the good part, right?
Exactly, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's go conversely, just because that is so scary. What are maybe some, I don't know if humorous is the right word, but maybe some more lighthearted experiences you've had.
Lighthearted experiences with them. So I like to go antiquing. It's fun. Go to like the old thrift shops and things like that, and you find, just cute little weird stuff. In Kentucky, there's lots of places that are very dusty, barns and things like that you can go into, and you can find treasures, if you will, just cute little things. And I was at one of these locations, and there were some marbles, and there was a little boy attached to the marbles. And I walked past him the first time. I wasn't going to take him home. And the little boy basically came up to me and sort of took my hand and was like, "No, I'm going with you." So I ended up buying the marbles and taking him home with me. And he is just this sweet little kid. I think his name is Billy. I'm not quite sure. He always has his hands in his mouth when he's trying to talk. Very little guy. Doesn't realize he's dead. He just basically wants to play with his marbles. They were his favorite toy. And just this sweet little warm creature that he just wants to sit there and play. He wants a safe place to sit and play. So he's very sweet. And if you're around, he will oftentimes come crawl in your lap just to sit. So you have some of these very, very sweet, very mundane things that happen also. And he's one of my favorites that I actually keep. So he hangs out.
So you're saying that Billy is still a part of your life?
Absolutely. I have a couple of haunted objects and a couple of dead things that still live in my house with me. Yes.
Huh. So I guess you mentioned that when you were at, the antique mall or where it was, that I guess it's hard to phrase. I guess the question is, I assume you always know, hey, this is not a living boy. This is a spirit. Is that the case, or do you not always know?
So when I was younger, I could not tell the difference between the living and the dead. I just simply couldn't. Over time, though, I have learned to sort of turn it down, if you will, so that I actually can function as a normal human. So yes, I can tell the difference now between what is here and what is there. They feel very different. Sometimes they don't look very different, but they feel very different. So it's just a matter of practice over time, basically learning what is here and what is there.
I gotcha. So you mentioned that you're in Kentucky. I'm actually in Indiana, so not too far from you.
Yeah.
And I was on your website and noticed, a few places that I've been myself. We've done like the Bourbon Trail and things, and toured some of those old places in Bardstown.
Yeah.
So is that I don't really know too much about most of this. We toured the jail and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Is that an area that's known to have a lot of, I guess, things happening?
Bardstown is. So Bardstown, specifically the Jailer's Inn and the Old Talbot Tavern, are both thought to be exceedingly haunted. The Old Jailer's Inn was actually the working jail up until, I believe, earlier this century, well, last century at this point, but it was in operation for a very, very long time. And it actually sat next to the tavern, which was a old stagecoach inn, where people would come and wait for the stagecoaches and stay overnight in between runs and things like that. And it's actually been host to people like Abraham Lincoln and Jesse James. His cousin was the sheriff in town, so he could come and be safe in town. So you had all these people coming through there and all of this sort of energy, and it was all focused around specifically those two buildings there and the cemetery back there behind it. And there's been a lot of reported paranormal activity in that sort of block of town. So you have at the Jailer's Inn, they'll see a woman walking up and down through there. There were people actually hung for crimes in the backyard of the Jailer's Inn. So there's been some things associated with that back there. They've seen I believe, a floating light in the cemetery directly behind it, as well as a ghost cat. And then in the Jailers, or in the Talbot Tavern itself, they have a lot of really odd things that have happened there. And I've stayed at the Talbot Tavern before, and the place has got some really weird energy to it. Now, the night that we stayed there, I didn't specifically see anything, but there were sounds that shouldn't have been there, like things running in the hallways at night when you open the door and there's nothing there and there's nowhere for them to have gone. Things like that happened. But people have reported the windows opening in there on their own and balls of light. There's lots of that sort of fifale old tradition of ghost lights just sort of wandering through that building. And I've been in there a couple of times on ghost hunts where they've actually had activity where the lights themselves will turn on and off with large groups of people in there when you have full visuals of where the light switches are and things like that. So it's a very charged place, but people forget that Federal Hill, which is my old Kentucky home, is actually about a mile up the road from there, which is also incredibly haunted. There were several sort of tragic deaths there, people falling out of windows in the summer and things like that. And a tombstone has been knocked over several times after it was the wrong type of tombstone requested by the person when he died. So just lots of weird activity in that area.
Yeah. So what is your place in all this? There's people who are, I guess, helping others connect with their loved ones. There's people that are ghost hunting, and then there's people, I don't know whether this is more like a church thing, but are trying to get rid of bad spirits. So do you go and seek these things out just for, I guess, personal benefit, or what's your role in the general public when it comes to this type of thing?
I don't really have a public-facing role, if you will. I will do research for teams. I've helped out with TV shows, things like that, sort of on the research end or on the psychic end, depending on what they need. But I don't do like readings. I don't connect people to their loved ones or things like that. I don't do it commercially at all. I will occasionally do it in very extreme circumstances for someone. But there are so many good psychics out there who are very good at that. And I find it extremely emotionally draining to do it. It's not how I'm meant to work in a psychic manner. It's not conducive for me to do it long periods of time. So what I end up doing a lot of times is a lot more on the research end. And I have, as I said earlier, somehow managed to get myself called in when people think that they have inhuman spirits. So ghost hunters, things like that, paranormal investigators, when they think they've come across an inhuman spirit, a lot of times I'll get called to come out and see, is it a person or is it a thing, and what's the easiest way to deal with it? I'm very much a believer in the sort of economy of motion idea. Let's find the quickest and easiest solution to make everybody happy. And that might not be removing the ghost every time. It might be giving an offering to a ghost to apologize for building something on their ancestral land or something like that. That happens quite a lot in this area, actually. But I do a lot of sort of that. And then I also will do on referral sort of help for people who are coming into their talents. That started in college. I started sort of collecting people who were starting to have an awakening, what they call it, when your psychic abilities start manifesting again. So I've been doing that with people that are going through that are older, but also people who have psychic children, specifically speaking to the parents about what worked for me when I was growing up and how they can sort of reassure their child about what's happening if they've realized what's happening, and how to sort of work them through what's going on and make them feel empowered. So I work a lot with psychics and with inhuman dead things, basically.
So another topic that you mentioned that I had never even really thought about, but then once you said it, I thought, why is that the case? So a lot of people talk about when they see ghosts that it's somebody from, a Civil War soldier, a Victorian era. It's always, old timey. So does the 80s hairband rockers, do they just not come back, or why is everyone seeing these 80 or these Civil War characters?
Right. So the 80s hairband rockers do occasionally come back, but not generally with the same frequency is what it comes down to. So in the Victorian era, there was a major focus on death specifically. Queen Victoria famously spent most of her later life in mourning for her husband. And it gave rise to sort of this idea and this fixation sort of internationally and anything that was affected by the British Empire with death and dying and what comes after. So a lot of people really took to heart this idea that when you die, you become a ghost. That was sort of the cultural mindset of the time. So these are people that were dying and then expecting to become spirits. So they become ghosts at a much higher frequency because that's what they think is the natural next step. Now, the Civil War sort of follows in the same tradition, but not the exact same one. So that was the largest loss of life, of American life, basically, ever seen. So that sort of one-on-one conflict really had a lot of emotional intensity. And the places where these things happened were literally covered in blood. it is that same sort of idea that led to the Victorian ideas, was the age of spiritualism that rose to prominence at the Civil War. People became obsessed with the idea of trying to reach and trying to speak to their dead relatives. So you have all of these live people who are trying to reach out to the dead, which it sort of pulled things back together. So it's live people dying and thinking that they're meant to become ghosts, and it's people trying to reach out to speak to these ghosts, sort of led to this weird mixture of just craziness that led to a proliferation of dead things that fit into those two specific categories. And we still see a lot of them today. Like, they don't realize, and sure, some of it has to do with trauma, but I think a lot of it actually has to do with the mindset of the people as they were dying, or the societies they were existing in at the time.
So you're saying that if people, when they were living and dying, if they had the mindset that they were going to become a ghost, that makes them more likely to actually become one?
I do believe that is the case, yes. The ones especially that seem to know that they are ghosts, seem to have thought that they were going to be a ghost before they died. The ones that I've met that are truly cognizant of what has happened to them seem to have believed that was what was going to be the case before they died. And it's a small sample set, I understand, but it's a very weird coincidence to see multiple times. You know what I mean?
No, for sure. So you mentioned too about working on TV shows in the past, and you mentioned one I believe it was on the CW network, which what Mysteries Decoded. What exactly was that, and what did you do with the program?
So Mysteries Decoded is a show on CW, and I was the first episode of that last year. So I was a co-host on that episode, and we were actually looking into the Lizzie Borden murders. So we had access to the Lizzie Borden bed and breakfast, the cemetery where they were all buried and where the autopsies and all took place, the actual tombs and things like that, and then to Maplecroft, which is the house that Lizzie and her sister lived in after the murders took place. And so we went to Fall River, myself and Jennifer, and she's the main host of the show. And we were just digging around to try and see if we could find any evidence that had been missed or had been overlooked or had been misinterpreted before. So we went to the courtroom and things like that and just looked at the transcripts of what had happened to Lizzie and what was going on then. And Jennifer is a private detective. So we just sort of put our heads together and tried to dig into that mystery of what actually took place that day at the Lizzie Borden bed and breakfast and who we thought was the culprit of that. And in doing so, Jennifer brought in, a forensic scientist and things like that. And I brought in a ghost hunting team, and they actually brought a bunch of equipment with them. And specifically, they brought in like an SLS camera, which is essentially a Kinect camera, which shows you the outline of a person. And like if there's a person on screen, it'll show you what the person is doing in stick figure form, but you can still see the outline of the physical person that is there. And we were in Abby Borden's room, which is where she was murdered at. And that was actually the room that Lizzie's uncle had been sleeping in the night before the murders. And she was making the bed when she was attacked and killed. And in there, we had over an hour of time where we were sitting there and we had direct communication with a spirit that they could all see on the SLS camera. And when you'd ask the spirit to do something, it would respond and it would do that. So you had the stick figure of the person that was there with the outline around them. And then you had the second stick figure that had no mask that anyone could visibly see that was responding back and forth. And that went on for over an hour inside the bed and breakfast. And then we ran a seance a channeling session, if you will, which is where I literally sort of give voice to the spirits. They talk to me and I repeat what they're saying, basically. I don't share well enough to be a true medium, but I can sort of play the intermediary if I have to. And so we did a channeling session at the bed and breakfast where we talked to Abigail Borden, who was the one who was murdered. And she was talking about her emotions and her feelings. And she was very still upset about the two girls, Lizzie and her sister, who never accepted her. She was their stepmother, and how upset she was about that. She was very emotional. And then we went to Maplecroft, which was Lizzie's house later, and we did a second channeling session where I talked to Lizzie for a little while, and that was rather enlightening as well, just sort of getting her side of the story, how she felt about how her life was viewed now. So it was a very, very weird, very intense week and a half that we spent in Fall River.
Yeah, hey, that's not. I didn't catch that episode. It sounds like something. This sounds like quite the experience for you, and quite the experience for even those who watch.
Absolutely, and if they want to see it, it is still up for free on cwc.com, so you can go watch that at any point.
Well, that I think I'll be one of those for sure. So, we talked about TV, and that's kind of a good segue to, I guess, the entertainment industry. How real are these things when we come to, movies and the paranormal, and then, you've already mentioned ghost hunters. What about all these reality shows that are ghost hunters? Are, first of all, does the paranormal movies, do they accurately portray things, and are these ghost hunter shows, do you think they're kind of made for TV reality, or do you think it's real?
So as far as the movies go, I think if half the things that they showed there were how it really happened, the world would be an absolutely terrifying place that no one would survive. I can't really see how that would work. I think they take things that are based on truth, like experiences like I had where I was pushed down the stairs. Clearly, she would have pushed me down the stairs and probably ripped my throat out at the bottom. That's, you know what I mean? The movies always seem to amp things up and make them more bigger and more dramatic and just a little bit crazier. There are some that are very good at keeping it sort of psychological and how it sort of really looks. But I think everything in those gets really sort of bumped up to a level that is truly entertaining. That's why you go to a horror movie like that. You go to get scared, and you need something that is truly terrifying to do that. So I think most of the movies have a fair amount of drama in them, even if they are based on real events. You've got to make it just a little bit extra of creepiness in there. And I don't blame them for it. It's entertainment, When it comes to the TV shows, I have been dealing back and forth with TV shows, helping on back end, things like that for about the last decade now. And I have been offered a lot of shows that I have turned down because if I'm asked to fake something, or if I'm asked to ignore something or exaggerate, that's not what I'm going to do. That's why I was so willing to work with the CW team, because it was a very straightforward, we want your opinion on what had happened. And I really respect shows that are like that. Now, given everything is TV is for entertainment, so they're going to sort of make the storyline look like it's more exciting than it is. They're going to take, we were there for about a week filming, and it was condensed down into like 45 minutes of TV. So, they had a lot more to work with to be able to condense it down to give it that sort of fun, exciting feeling to it. That being said, some TV shows are a lot more fact-based and experientially based and based in reality. There are a lot of good shows out there like that. There are others that everywhere they go, they're going to find a demon because demons sell. And you're going to react more, and, people are going to do what they're going to do to make an entertaining show. And those shows are entertaining, but I do believe that there are those out there that are a smidgen less documentary and a bit more entertainment based, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And that's kind of what I suspected. Obviously, you've got to, on TV, you've got to entertain people, and that's the number one thing.
Yeah.
So I guess the next question, given that this isn't necessarily, a paranormal podcast that you may do more frequently, I guess it's kind of it's probably an easier question for you, given that you don't really do this commercially. You're not really trying to sell anything. But what do you say to people who do listen to this and say this is all just kind of goofy and it's not real?
They're totally entitled to their own opinion. It's not my job to try and convince anyone of anything. If they do happen to come across a paranormal encounter, when it happens to them, they'll know it. And if it never happens to them, great. If it does, it does. But it's a lot of people get really caught up in that idea of needing to prove themselves or needing to show everyone that they are right and that this is real. I grew up in the Bible Belt. I know that is not possible. But I also know that what I've experienced and what some of my friends have experienced is very, very real. So I hope that they enjoy their life and they can get a laugh out of some of my stories if they don't believe them. That's entirely fine, but to each their own.
Right. No, that's kind of my thought too. I've interviewed some other people that have, one person was, had spoken about going to dying and going to heaven and going to hell. And, I asked her that same question. And I mean, that's kind of the same thing she said. Obviously it's believe it or don't believe it. I guess you'll find out sooner or later if I'm telling the truth or not. So
Yeah.
I appreciate that answer. So do your family, you obviously said that your parents didn't necessarily tell you until later on. So I assume that they are supportive, but you do grow up in the Bible Belt. Those around you, have they generally supported, this, I guess your abilities?
My family absolutely has. They weren't quite sure what to do with it when I was smaller, but as I've gotten older, they've been very supportive and very sort of, and it's not even so much that they focus on it. It's just that it is in this family. It is the reality that we have. So they work with it as it is, and we go on about a life. It's not really a big deal. It's just something that occasionally happens.
Yeah. Do you think that this is, I mean, what causes some people to be this way and some not? Do you think it's hereditary? Did you get it from your parents?
I do think that's a lot of it is hereditary, yes. So my grandfather has also had weird experiences. So it does seem to travel down through family lines. And the farther back you trace things, you'll get family legends of, oh, this person saw things and this person knew things and things like that throughout the history of I've gone back and talked to people and looked at things. So it does seem to be a hereditary trait. And I found that a lot in the kids that I've dealt with that have these sort of quirks. You talk to mom, oh no, this has never happened to me. But my grandmother, she saw this, this, and this when she was a child. And I was like, well, there you go. There does seem to be a hereditary component to a lot of this, at least in what I have seen.
Well, I really appreciated, your time. I really, I enjoyed our conversation. My big goal is just to have conversations with interesting people with a story to tell. And that's definitely the case here. I never really give any kind of, thoughts and opinion. And I really won't do that now, but I do think that if nothing else, even if people do listen to this and think it's crazy, that it's a great story. If they listen and think that, it's real, that's great too. So whatever people get from this, I enjoyed it. So I really appreciate your time.
And thank you so much for having me. It was a really good conversation.
Absolutely. So normally, people come on because they have a book they're selling or a website they want people to go to. I don't know that that's the case for you, but if you do have anything that you want to plug or talk about, I know you did mention a conference. You're more than welcome to mention. I don't know that unfortunately this podcast will go out before then, but anything else, please do mention.
So at this point in the year, I only have one conference left, and it's going to be in late November. That's the Scarefest Con, but that is my last event for this very lovely Corona year here where everything got canceled. So that is all I have going on right now. No books to pitch, no TV shows to get you to watch, anything like that. Just paranormal stuff. I'm doing some research now that might get turned into a book, but we shall see. But if anyone does have any paranormal experiences, things like that they'd like to talk about, I am more than willing to listen to people. If they want to reach out, the best place to get a hold of me is at my Instagram, which is Amarna Marie, AmarnaMarie on Instagram, and I'd be happy to talk to them about their paranormal experiences.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you for your time, and have a great conference, and thanks for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.
And that was my interview with Stephanie Bingham. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned just as much as I did. Just like I said in our conversation, whether you believe her or whether you don't, I think that it's a fascinating story for sure. Learned a lot about the history of paranormal as well. Whether you think it's something that's there or that it's not. It definitely has been a part of our culture. So to hear some of the history of it was really fascinating, I think. Like I said, I don't really ever put too much opinion in it, and I'm not going to now. But I can tell you, Stephanie was an absolute delight to speak with, and I'm really glad that I got to speak with her and learn a little bit more about her and what she does here. I guess her space in the world. She's like I mentioned, she's very close to me, just a state below. So really enjoyed speaking with her. I'm really glad that you decided to tune in. I hope it didn't scare you too much, or if you like to be scared, I hope it scared you a lot. But no, I really try to keep it, relatively calm. I didn't want to get too scary, and I don't think we did. But thanks for being here. Hope to see you next time, and take it away, Chris.
This has been Not in a Huff with Jackson Huff. Thank you for listening. Be sure to join us next time, where we will interview another amazing guest who is sure to make you laugh or make you think. Or hey, maybe even both. But until then, keep being awesome.